The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic thump of my heart. My hands, clasped tightly in my lap, were slick with sweat. "This is it," I whispered to Julian, squeezing his hand. He gave me a reassuring nod, his eyes full of concern. Around us, the gallery buzzed with hushed whispers, the air thick with anticipation. 12 years of secrets, one explosive family dinner. It all led to this. My father, Richard Johnson, sat across the aisle, his face a mask of stony indifference. He refused to meet my gaze. Beside him, my brother, Mark, smirked, a smug glint in his eye. "Ready for this, sis?" he mouthed, the words laced with sarcasm. I closed my eyes briefly, fighting back the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm me. I had to do this, not just for me, but for the memory of my mother. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. Judge Mallory entered, her expression severe. The room fell silent. "Johnson versus Johnson," she announced, her voice crisp and clear. "This case concerns a contested will. My lawyer, Miss Carter, a formidable woman with steely grey hair, rose to her feet. Your Honor, this is not simply a matter of contesting a will. This is a case of deliberate deception, emotional manipulation, and blatant favoritism that has spanned decades." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "This Thanksgiving, family secrets will come to light." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd underestimated me. He'd always underestimated me. "My client, Sophia Johnson," Ms. Carter continued, her voice rising in power, "has been systematically undermined and belittled by her own family, denied her rightful inheritance, and subjected to years of emotional distress, all because she chose a path they deemed unsuitable for a sensitive girl." That phrase, it stung, even now. I could almost hear my father's voice, dripping with condescension. "The military is no place for sensitive girls, Sophia. You're better suited for, well, I don't know, something more feminine." He trailed off, never quite specifying what that something might be, but the implication was clear. I wasn't strong enough, not tough enough, to follow in his footsteps, or rather, the footsteps he'd envisioned for my brother. Ms. Carter's voice snapped me back to the present. They mocked her dreams, dismissed her ambitions, and painted a false narrative of her life to justify their prejudice. She gestured towards Mark, her own brother, blinded by jealousy and fueled by his father's favoritism, actively participated in this charade, going so far as to have her arrested at Thanksgiving dinner, a blatant act of aggression designed to further humiliate and silence her. The murmuring in the gallery intensified. "Arrested at Thanksgiving dinner by her own brother." The headlines practically wrote themselves. I could feel the weight of all those judging eyes on me. Shame burned in my chest, a familiar ache. But this time, it was different. This time, I wasn't shrinking from the scrutiny. I was welcoming it. Let them stare. Let them whisper. The truth would come out. "This case," Ms. Carter continued, her voice ringing with conviction, "is about more than money. It's about exposing the toxic dynamics within this family, about holding those responsible accountable for their actions, and about reclaiming a legacy that was rightfully earned." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Sophia Johnson is not just a sensitive girl. She is a decorated officer, a woman of immense strength and courage, and she will not be silenced any longer." My throat tightened with emotion. I'd never heard anyone speak about me with such fierce admiration, such unwavering belief. It was empowering. For years, I'd internalized my family's dismissive attitudes, questioning my own worth, doubting my own abilities. But Ms. Carter's words, spoken with such conviction in this public forum, chipped away at those deeply ingrained insecurities. I glanced at Julian, who gave me a small, encouraging smile. He'd always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. He'd been my rock, my confidant, the one person who saw me for who I truly was, not the caricature my family had created. He'd encouraged me to fight, to stand up for myself, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. We intend to prove, Ms. Carter continued, turning back to the judge, that Brigadier General Samantha Wilson. She emphasized my rank, letting the words resonate in the courtroom is the rightful heir to her mother's estate, and that her father and brother conspired to defraud her of her inheritance based on a fabricated narrative of incompetence and instability. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of gasps and whispers. Brigadier General. The words hung in the air, charged with unspoken power. My father's face, finally, registered shock. Mark's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of stern disbelief. This was just the beginning. They thought they knew me. They thought they had me pegged. They were wrong. Dead wrong. From kitchen sets to General stars. A daughter's powerful revenge. The truth was finally coming out, and it was going to shatter their carefully constructed world. The game had just begun. The courtroom buzzed, a hive of whispers and shuffling papers. My brother, Mark, sat across from me, his face a mask of stony indifference. I could still feel the phantom chill of the handcuffs on my wrists, the humiliation of being arrested at Thanksgiving dinner by her own brother. It had been a long road to this courtroom. 12 years of secrets festering like a wound. Objection, Your Honor, Mark's lawyer drawled, his voice smooth as silk. The witness's testimony is irrelevant. I glanced at Julian, my fiancé, his hand squeezing mine reassuringly. It's okay, Sophia, he whispered. You're doing great. But was I? Could I really lay bare 12 years of hurt, of feeling like an outsider in my own family, just to prove a point? The judge's gavel cracked, pulling me back to the present. Overruled, she said, her gaze sharp. The witness may continue. And so, I began to tell my story, starting with the day Grandma Ruth planted the seed of a dream that would eventually tear my family apart. It was the summer I turned 16. Grandma Ruth, her silver hair braided tightly against the Louisiana heat, sat on the porch swing, gently rocking. I sat beside her, fiddling with a loose thread on the worn denim of my shorts. The air hung heavy and sweet with the scent of honeysuckle and freshly cut grass. Dad was inside, booming on the phone about some business deal, his voice echoing through the open windows. Mark, 2 years older and already radiating the self-assured arrogance that would become his trademark, was off with his friends, no doubt cruising around town in his newly acquired beat-up Ford pickup. I felt a familiar pang of loneliness, the feeling of being overlooked, insignificant. Penny for your thoughts, sweetie, Grandma Ruth said, her voice soft as the rustling leaves in the ancient oak tree that shaded the porch. I shrugged, just thinking, I mumbled, about what I want to do with my life. And what's that, dear? She asked, her kind eyes searching mine. I hesitated, telling my family, especially Dad, about my desire to join the military felt like admitting to a desire to walk on the moon, preposterous, unladylike. Certainly, not the path he'd envisioned for his only daughter. Well, I started, twisting the thread around my finger. I've been reading about the military academies. West Point, the Naval Academy. They sound incredible. Grandma Ruth smiled. A real smile. Not the polite ones she gave Dad when he bragged about Mark's latest football triumph. And what do you find so incredible about them, Sophia? I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. The discipline, the challenge, the chance to serve something bigger than myself. I paused, looking down at my hands. I want to make a difference, Grandma. She nodded, her hand resting gently on mine. That's a noble ambition, Sophia. Something to be proud of. Her words were simple, but they held a weight, a validation that I craved. But Dad, I trailed off, the familiar wave of doubt washing over me. He'll never approve. Dad had always had this image of me going to some fancy college, marrying a lawyer or a doctor, settling down in a nice house with a white picket fence. The military was, well, it was the antithesis of everything he envisioned. Grandma Ruth squeezed my hand. Your father loves you, Sophia. He just wants what he thinks is best for you. But sometimes, she winked, what's best for us isn't always what others expect. Her words gave me a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could convince him. Later that day, armed with brochures and a carefully rehearsed speech, I approached Dad in his study. He was hunched over his desk, a mountain of paperwork in front of him. The air was thick with the smell of cigar smoke. Dad, I began, my voice trembling slightly. Can I talk to you about something? He grunted, not looking up. Make it quick, Sophia. I've got a lot on my plate. I swallowed, my carefully crafted speech dissolving into a jumble of nervous words. I laid the brochures on his desk, the glossy images of cadets in crisp uniforms staring up at him. He finally looked up, his brow furrowed. What's this? He asked, his tone impatient. I want to apply to West Point, I blurted out, the words rushing out in a single breath. He stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. Then he burst out laughing, a loud, booming laugh that filled the room. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a dismissive, condescending laugh that made my cheeks burn with shame. West Point, he repeated, still chuckling. Sophia, what are you talking about? That's for boys. You're going to a good college, get a good husband and settle down. That's what girls do. But I want to serve my country, I protested, my voice rising. I want to make a difference. He stopped laughing, his face hardening. Serving your country. He picked up one of the brochures, flicking it dismissively. This isn't some game, Sophia. This is the military. It's dangerous. It's not for delicate little girls like you. He emphasized the word delicate with a sneer, as if my very femininity disqualified me from pursuing my dream. I'm not delicate, I retorted, my voice shaking with anger and frustration. I'm strong, I'm capable. He waved a hand dismissively. Don't be ridiculous. Sophia, this is just a phase. You'll grow out of it. He returned to his paperwork, dismissing me as if I were a bothersome fly. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, tears stinging my eyes. Then, I turned and fled the room, the weight of his disapproval crushing me. I ran to Grandma Ruth, burying my face in her lap, the sobs racking my body. He doesn't understand, I cried. He just doesn't understand. Grandma Ruth stroked my hair, her voice soothing. I know, sweetie, I know. But even her comfort couldn't erase the sting of my father's rejection. Later that evening, Mark sauntered into the living room, tossing his car keys onto the coffee table. What's with all the waterworks? He asked, smirking. He'd obviously overheard my conversation with Dad. Nothing, I mumbled, wiping my eyes. Oh, come on, Saf, he said, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. Don't tell me Dad crushed your little army dream. I glared at him. It's not a little dream, I hissed. He laughed. Sure. Whatever you say. Soldier girl, you wouldn't last a day in basic training. He flexed his bicep. You need muscles for that kind of thing. His words, though meant to be teasing, cut deep. They reinforced the message Dad had already delivered. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't what they wanted me to be. That day, the seed of resentment began to grow, a tiny, bitter sprout in the garden of my heart. It would take years, years of being overlooked and underestimated, for that sprout to blossom into the full-blown rage that brought me to this courtroom today. The stuffy air of the lecture hall hung thick with the scent of stale coffee and ambition. Professor Eldridge, a wiry man whose passion for military strategy bordered on the obsessive, paced before the chalkboard, sketching out the intricacies of counterintelligence operations. My pen flew across my notebook, capturing every twist and turn of his lecture. I was fascinated. This wasn't just about textbook scenarios. It was about the human element, the psychology of deception, the art of predicting your enemy's next move. Miss Johnson, Professor Eldridge's voice cut through the murmur of the class. A penny for your thoughts. I blinked, my focus snapping back to the present. Sir, you seem particularly engrossed today. Tell me, what's capturing your attention so intensely? He leaned against the lectern, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Just complexity of it all, sir, I stammered, feeling my cheeks flush. It's like a puzzle, trying to anticipate every possibility. He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest, indeed, and a dangerous puzzle at that, but one that requires a particular kind of mind. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, almost as if he was assessing me, weighing me up. A mind like yours. Perhaps, that moment, that look, it ignited something within me. A spark of recognition, a feeling that I had finally found my place. I'd always excelled in academics, but this was different. This felt like a calling. The next few weeks became a blur of late-night study sessions and intense discussions with Professor Eldridge. He saw something in me, a potential I hadn't even realized I possessed. He pushed me, challenged me, and encouraged me to think outside the box. It was exhilarating. Finally, something that felt real. Something beyond the stifling expectations of my family. Samantha, Professor Eldridge said one afternoon after class, his voice low and serious. I've been observing your work, your dedication. You have a rare aptitude for this kind of thinking. My heart pounded. Where was this going? Thank you, sir. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. I have a contact in military intelligence. They're always looking for bright young minds. Would you be interested in learning more? My breath hitched. Military intelligence. This was beyond anything I had imagined. This was a chance to escape the suffocating confines of my family's expectations, to forge my own path. Yes, sir, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear. Yes, I would. The meeting with the recruiter was like stepping into another world. The sterile office, the crisp uniforms, the air of quiet authority. It was intimidating, but also thrilling. The recruiter, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, spoke about the challenges and the rewards of a career in intelligence. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She laid it all out. The long hours, the intense pressure, the potential dangers. But through it all, I felt a pull, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt before. Samantha Johnson, the recruiter said, her gaze unwavering. We believe you have the potential to make a significant contribution to our nation's security. The weight of her words settled upon me, a heavy responsibility, but also an incredible honor. I knew, in that moment, that this was the path I was meant to take. This was my escape, my chance to prove my worth. Not to my family, but to myself. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of interviews, background checks, and psychological evaluations. It was grueling, but the thought of finally breaking free from the shadow of my brother and the suffocating expectations of my father fueled my determination. I kept the entire process a secret from my family. They wouldn't understand. They would see it as a betrayal, a rejection of the life they had planned for me, a life that revolved around finding a suitable husband, settling down, and fulfilling their narrow definition of success. I remember the day I received the official acceptance letter. I was sitting in my dorm room, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. The crisp white envelope felt heavy in my hand, the weight of my future resting in its contents. I tore it open, my hands shaking, and scanned the words. "We are pleased to inform you," tears welled in my eyes as I read the words over and over again. I had done it. I had escaped. I had forged my own path. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted me to be a good little housewife, to find a wealthy husband and settle down. And here I was, embarking on a career that would take me across the globe, that would demand strength, intelligence, and unwavering dedication. A career that would make me more successful than they could ever imagine. This secret, this double life, became my shield, my protection against their constant belittling and their suffocating expectations. This was my revenge, my quiet act of defiance. The following years were a blur of intense training, demanding missions, and rapid promotions. I excelled in every aspect of my work, proving my worth time and time again. The further I climbed the ranks, the deeper the chasm grew between the life I lived and the facade I maintained for my family. The thought of their reaction if they ever found out the truth, the sheer shock and disbelief on their faces. It became a twisted source of amusement, a private joke I shared with myself. 12 years of secrets. One explosive family dinner. It was a burden I carried, a heavy cloak of deception, but it was also my power, my secret weapon. And I knew, deep down, that one day, the truth would come to light. One day, I would reveal the woman I had become, the woman they had never bothered to see. And on that day, their world would shatter. Arrested at Thanksgiving dinner by her own brother. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. This Thanksgiving, family secrets will come to light. This Thanksgiving, everything would change. The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, choked with the perfume of my mother's lilac and the acrid tang of Ethan's smugness. He adjusted his tie. The silky shimmering peacock blew against his crisp white shirt. My stomach churned. "Just admit it, Sophia," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You've always been jealous. Always trying to one-up me, jealous." I repeated, the word catching in my throat. "Ethan, we're in court. This isn't a playground squabble." "Oh. But it is, isn't it?" he sneered. "Ever since we were kids, you've been trying to prove you're better than me." He gestured towards the jury, his smile widening. "This whole lawsuit, 'tis charade, it's just another attempt to steal the spotlight." My lawyer, Ms. Carter, placed a calming hand on my arm. "Sophia, we'll address this in our closing statements." I nodded, but my heart hammered against my ribs. Ethan's words, like poisoned darts, found their mark. 12 years of secrets. One explosive family dinner. That Thanksgiving, the one that ended with me being arrested at Thanksgiving dinner by my own brother, had ripped the scab off old wounds. The humiliation, the betrayal, all of it flooded back, raw and stinging. I glanced at Julian in the gallery, his hand gripping mine tightly. His presence, his unwavering support, was the only anchor in this storm. "He doesn't understand," I whispered to Julian, my voice barely audible. "I know," he murmured back. "But you'll get your chance to tell your side." Ethan continued his theatrical performance, painting me as a bitter, envious sister driven by resentment. He recounted fabricated childhood incidents, twisting memories to fit his narrative. He even brought up the time I'd won the science fair in 7th grade, claiming I'd sabotaged his volcano project. "She always had to win," he declared, his voice choked with fake emotion. "Even if it meant cheating." The judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Johnson, please stick to the facts of the case." "The facts are, Your Honor," Ethan retorted, "that my sister is a liar and a manipulator. She's trying to swindle our family out of our rightful inheritance." My hands clenched into fists. I wanted to scream, to leap across the table and shake the truth out of him, But Ms. Carter's hand on my arm restrained me. Patience, Sophia, she whispered. Your turn is coming. The prosecution rested their case, and a heavy silence descended over the courtroom. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the cross-examination. Ethan's lawyer, a slick, silver-haired man named Mr. Sterling, approached the witness stand with a predatory gleam in his eye. Ms. Johnson, he began, his voice smooth as silk. You claim that your brother and father conspired to deny you your share of the inheritance based on the false premise that your career was less than impressive. Is that correct? Yes, I reply, my voice clear and steady. They believed my work with the government wasn't as valuable as Ethan's business ventures. I deliberately kept my answer vague, a necessary precaution to protect the classified nature of my work. From kitchen sets to general stars, a daughter's powerful revenge. The truth of my rank and accomplishments still remained hidden, a carefully guarded secret. Mr. Sterling smirked. And what exactly is this government work that you're so secretive about? I'm a consultant, I said, keeping my tone neutral. A consultant, he repeated, drawing out the word, a rather nebulous term. Can you be more specific? I'm afraid I can't, I reply, my voice firm. Certain aspects of my work are confidential. Mr. Sterling leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. So, you refuse to tell this court what you actually do for a living? I've told you what I can, I said, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. I'm a consultant for the government. I'm bound by confidentiality agreements. He pressed further, trying to trap me in a contradiction, to paint me as evasive and untrustworthy. But I held my ground, deflecting his questions with practiced ease. The tension in the courtroom crackled like static electricity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Sterling straightened up. Very well, Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice laced with thinly veiled sarcasm. Perhaps we can move on to something more concrete. You claim that your father, before his passing, expressed his desire for you and your brother to inherit his estate equally. Do you have any proof of this? I do, I said, my voice ringing with newfound confidence. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's face paled. Mr. Sterling's smirk vanished. Ms. Carter rose to her feet. Your Honor, we would like to present a new piece of evidence. The judge nodded. Ms. Carter approached the bench and handed him a sealed envelope. He opened it, his brow furrowing as he read the contents. A hush fell over the room, thick and expectant. The judge looked up, his expression unreadable. Miss Carter, he said, his voice resonating through the silent courtroom. Can you explain the significance of this document? Miss Carter turned to the jury, her voice clear and strong. This, ladies and gentlemen, she said, holding out a small, worn leather-bound book, is Brigadier General Samantha Wilson's personal journal. It contains entries detailing conversations with her father, explicitly stating his wishes for the equal division of his estate. A wave of murmurs washed over the courtroom. Ethan stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. My heart soared. This was it. The turning point. The twist. The truth was finally coming to light. The judge turned to me. Brigadier General Wilson, he said, his voice respectful. Would you please approach the stand? The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, a stark contrast to the crisp autumn day outside. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the otherwise stagnant atmosphere. I shifted in my seat, the stiff fabric of my dress scratching against my skin. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It's almost over, Julian whispered, squeezing my hand. His touch, usually a source of comfort, felt strangely distant. I could barely manage a weak smile in return. 12 years of secrets, one explosive family dinner, it all culminated in this moment. My father, George Johnson, sat across the aisle, his face a mask of stony indifference. He hadn't looked at me directly since I took the stand, recounting years of subtle slights and blatant disregard. From kitchen sets to general stars, a daughter's powerful revenge. He'd scoff openly when I'd presented evidence of my military career, dismissing my accomplishments as play acting. He called me a liar, a disgrace to the family name. My brother, Mark, sat beside him, a smug smirk playing on his lips. He'd been the architect of my Thanksgiving arrest, a cruel stunt meant to humiliate me in front of our entire family. Arrested at Thanksgiving dinner by her own brother. The memory still stung, a raw wound that refused to heal. All rise. The bailiff barked, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Judge Thompson entered, her expression inscrutable. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. This was it, the moment of truth. The jury has reached a verdict, the judge announced, her gaze sweeping across the room. My stomach twisted into knots. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the hushed whispers around me. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, stood and handed the verdict to the bailiff, who then passed it to the judge. Judge Thompson unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the document. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, every second stretched into an eternity. I squeezed Julian's hand tighter, my knuckles turning white. He returned the pressure, his eyes fixed on the judge. In the case of Johnson versus Johnson, Judge Thompson began, her voice clear and steady. The jury finds in favor of the plaintiff, Samantha Johnson. A wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. I gasped, tears welling in my eyes. Julian's grip tightened, and I could feel him trembling beside me. We won, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I nodded, unable to speak, but Judge Thompson wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, her gaze shifting to my father, the court recognizes the plaintiff's claim to her rightful inheritance, as outlined in the recently discovered will of Ruth Wilson, my grandmother. Grandma Ruth. She had always been my fiercest supporter, the one person who truly believed in me, even when I downplayed my achievements, pretending to be content with a mundane life. She seemed to know there was more to my story. I remember one afternoon, sitting with her in her sun-drenched kitchen, sipping tea and talking about my office job. She'd smiled knowingly, a twinkle in her eye. Samantha, she'd said, you remind me of your grandfather. He was a man of few words, but great deeds. At the time, I dismissed it as a harmless compliment. Now, I realized it had been so much more than that, a hint, perhaps. A secret shared between two souls who understood each other without the need for words. Judge Thompson continued, the will, dated just weeks before Mrs. Wilson's passing, stipulates that her entire estate, including the Johnson family trust, is to be transferred to her granddaughter, Samantha Johnson, in recognition of her exceptional service and unwavering dedication to her country. My father's face turned a shade of purple I hadn't thought possible. He sputtered, trying to speak, but no words came out. Mark sat beside him, his smug smirk replaced by a look of utter disbelief. The truth, the one they had tried so hard to bury, had finally come to light. A family legacy shattered by a hidden truth. This Thanksgiving, family secrets will come to light. This is outrageous. My father finally managed to choke out, his voice trembling with rage. That will is a forgery. My mother would never. He trailed off, realizing the futility of his argument. Judge Thompson silenced him with a raised hand. The authenticity of the will has been verified, Mr. Johnson. I advise you to accept the court's decision. My father sank back in his chair, defeated. The fight had gone out of him. The years of manipulation, the constant belittling, The cruel Thanksgiving arrest, all of it had backfired spectacularly. He had underestimated me, underestimated the strength and resilience I had cultivated in the face of his disapproval. He had tried to erase my accomplishments, to diminish my worth. But in the end, it was his own legacy that lay in ruins. The courtroom burst with hushed whispers as people began to file out. Julian wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "You did it, Sophia," he whispered, his voice filled with pride. "You won." I closed my eyes, letting the reality of the moment sink in. It was over. The battle was won. The truth had prevailed. And as I walked out of the courtroom, hand in hand with Julian, bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun, I knew that I was finally free. Free from the shadows of the past, free from the burden of secrets, free to embrace the future with open arms. The revenge wasn't just sweet, it was complete.